Phases to the names.
Alrighty. Cool. So yeah, kind of what happened. Dr. Dow, I think that's how you pronounce that
Cool.
name. Um, he was on a United flight, and the flight was overbooked. The flight attendants or the flight clerk people at the front desk counter had made the decision to ask for volunteers. No volunteers, or there was one more who had to volunteer, and he was selected at random via a lottery to be bumped from the flight and to book on the next flight out. He refused, so he was forcibly removed from the airplane via security officers. I think they were armed, if I'm not mistaken, there. And it turned into an entire debacle with the United Airlines really kind of dropping the ball on their response and the subsequent fallout afterwards.
Did you guys watch the video?
Yeah, that was pretty brutal.
I
He's
know.
being dragged out, right?
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
it shows I actually used this as an example in one of my previous classes. And I mean just the video of him being dragged out, he starts screaming, his face gets all
Mm-hmm.
bloodied up, and everybody starts saying, like, "Oh my gosh, look at what you've done." And this this poor sweet man just being dragged off of a plane for no reason. I mean, it's mind boggling to me.
Well, there is a reason behind it, and the reason is greed, pretty much, because they overbooked in the anticipation that there would be passengers who wouldn't show up to the flight. And of course, when everybody does show up for the flight, they're left with, well, now we have too many people and too few spots, all in the search of that almighty dollar. So yeah, I do think, and the extra sad part is that it's a doctor. He's older in age. I think it said like 68 or 70 or something like that. But more importantly, like nobody deserves to be treated that way. Nobody deserves to be dragged off. I think didn't he like hit his head on some of the seats or something like that?
Yeah, I think he had like a head injury of some sort.
He
Jeez.
did, yeah. And he was supposed to be like he was traveling for work. He had some sort of doctorly duties the next day that he obviously missed, which is affecting other people that weren't even on the plane then at that point. So,
Right, right.
And I think like just the optics of everything, especially the main video that got circulated around the internet, there's a lot of reaction to that, and it looked really bad on the airline, and there's a lot of just general outrage um, when a lot of people saw that video. So
and when you think about how it went from, like everybody involved initially is in the cabin of an airplane, and how quickly all of that exploded online with social media access nowadays. And like now everybody across the country is viewing what just happened. And by the time that plane landed, I'm sure it was already a complete crisis that nobody on the plane really even anticipated becoming as big as it did. Or maybe they hoped it would. Maybe that's why they posted it. Um, but it's just crazy to think how social media really has changed the landscape in these types of situations.
And that really does touch too on what you have here pointed your point C. It is social media that is the primary driver, and it's not just one angle of that video that's taken. There's several people from the aircraft who are taking that same video, so you get to see this event unfold in 3D, and then the rapid sharing capabilities of social media allow that hypercharged moment to be kind of supercharged with the algorithms and the way that they're designed to drop these situations in front of our lap because look, it's going to get the engagement. It already has gotten that engagement. And because of that, the public responds viscerally to that kind of uh, incident as it's unfolding. Like you said, before the plane even landed, likely there was already thousands and thousands of views and shares and whatever else.
Crazy. Back in the day, you'd have to wait for the news to report something or a newspaper article or radio, and now you get the audio, the visual, the video, like the interaction. You get to see comments, you get to see how other people are responding. Quite frankly, people will just argue and get so upset about things online and they start hating each other. And I mean, it's a different world we're living in, that's for sure.
Do you
But
guys, or how do you guys think the company responded? Like, do you think they responded not very well or could have done better?
terrible initially.
Yeah. I don't think
Um,
they initially they didn't think like the optics of it, you know. And it got out of hand really quickly, so they didn't know what to do.
yeah, I think that one of the um, where is it?
Yeah, I've actually found the part here on the paper where they had responded, and it is very they take a very basic denial approach, kind of like we were speaking uh, towards last week, looking at those readings. They really do not accept the onus of what was going on. They state this is an upsetting event to all of us here at United. I apologize for having to reaccommodate these customers. So even that word choice there, reaccommodate, they purchased a service from this company. They purchased the original accommodation. The fact that they're having to state to reaccommodate, it's like they're going out of their way to do what's right for these customers when you should have delivered on the in the first place. There should not have been any kind of need to reaccommodate. So the fact that they're not even taking full responsibility is it plays right into that denial posture that is referred to in our text.
Yeah, and they say we apologize for the overbook situation. Further details on the removed customer should be directed to authorities. There is zero additional information given. What authorities? The FBI, the CIA, like United authorities, TSA, like who are we talking about here? There's nothing clear cut and dry about anything. It's very vague, and quite frankly they say we apologize for the overbook situation, not we apologize for how Dr. David Dow was treated. So I think they're negating the I mean that was like the root of the problem, but it snowballed from there and it turned into a ton of other problems because from what I was reading too, he was actually he was one of four passengers that were removed. His was just the most broadcasted and the most violent. Um, but I mean, how that affects other people is just simply not taken into consideration. And like you said, Michael, it's just greed. They're all just wanting that dollar. We need a booked flight. We need every seat sold, and we don't care who we inconvenience in order to get that. And I mean, it's sad. It's just sad to me. But so I think their initial public response, to answer your question, James, was absolutely terrible. There was, as we've learned in this class and in our text, and being accountable and being upfront, which we can go into all that here in a minute, but nothing happened. It was very vague. It was very, trying to stay hidden under the radar. We're going to kind of try to pretend this never happened, and they weren't able to get away with that. So
Yeah. And it's overbooking a flight is an effective policy really because you really need to fill every seat to make the flight profitable, you know. So, and I think a lot of people were upset because it's like once you're on the plane, you don't think you're going to get kicked off, but sometimes you just do, you know. And I think that's what outraged a lot of people. It's like, oh, I've been there, you know.
no, I've been bumped from a flight and it completely derailed my entire life. I
Yeah.
was expecting to be home on a Sunday, and then I'm told I couldn't get on another flight until that following Thursday. And it's like, I have a job, I have family, I have pets, I have, that's additional cost for me to park my car at the airport, like so
Yeah.
many things. And it there, so I mean, just zero empathy from them. Especially, I mean, and I wasn't hit in the face. I wasn't carried off a plane bloodied and screaming. So,
Yeah.
uh, I mean,
And it's like, oh, that's like, that's a doctor that's getting kicked off. And so if they're going to kick off a doctor, they could kick off me kind of thing.
yeah, yeah. And so definitely some blame shifting going on, definitely zero empathy. And then to your point, Michael, that we had kind of chatted about earlier, um, those different response postures that you were hitting on.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know that kind of to what James was saying too, that does lead into what the leadership could have done better. And it does really come down to how well these organizations are communicating with the customer. Because you're right, the margins on flights are extremely thin. They do need to fill at least most of the seats, if not all of them. And that could be a conversation even for another time about the logistics of how they fill planes and how many routes they have and so on and so forth. But the fact of the matter is that there are tools available for those situations. One of those being standby. So why was the plane, even if they are going to overbook it, why was there not some mechanism in place that automatically put those passengers who booked last minute or close to the departure time, why were those passengers not automatically put on a standby list where they're communicated from the time they purchased those tickets? Hey, just so you know, you are buying an overbooked flight. There is a potential that you will not have a seat on this flight. You'll be placed on a standby list, which means if a position opens up on that flight, you will be filling a spot that's becoming available. These are mechanisms. We have the technology in place already. These mechanisms are not being used, and they certainly weren't used at this time because there was no communication in place for these passengers. Like James said, they're already on the plane. At that point, I expect I'm in my seat. I'm going to make it to my destination. There should be no question if I'm going to make that flight if I'm already in the seat. They're like, what are we doing here, right? So that should have never happened to begin with because of those mechanisms that can be in place.
And I guarantee if they offered, I mean, I've seen them go up as high as $2,000 for offering somebody to step off of the plane. You can go, I mean, I don't know what the max is, but why not just make the announcement and say, hey, we're offering, and at $2,000, I saw people fighting each other to get out of that plane because they wanted that $2,000 flight credit. And at that point, it's not impacting the airline's bottom dollar because they're simply securing another flight for another day when most people travel with their families, their friends, they travel multiple times. So like you're saying, Michael, there's other ways that they could have avoided a situation like this. So what in talking about it all and how we think they could have done better, what do you guys think should have happened in the first 24 hours that obviously did not?
I think accepting responsibility is the key piece here, right? The rebuilding posture should have been the immediate posture that they were in. The compensation part of this, obviously, the victim here, Dr. Dow, was not treated with any sort of respect. I don't see any kind of compensation for that trouble or the harmful experience that he went through. And furthermore, the company didn't even set out any kind of like public apology. It was very I'm sorry that we had to reaccommodate. It's that denial, it's scapegoating, it's somebody else's fault. They're placing the onus, the blame on somebody else. But within that first 24 hours, the experience Dr. Dow went through is unforgivable. It should have never happened. United takes complete 100% responsibility for this event for happening because it's not like they had overbooked for other passengers. From my understanding from the outline here, the passengers were bumped for United corporate workers. So that's even an extra layer to that is this is the company's fault. The company is prioritizing the company, not the customer, and then they're not even apologizing for it. That should have been the very first things out of their mouth.
I agree.
Yeah, I definitely agree. They should have at least compensated him for the flight and really not even allowed him to even get on the flight in the first hand if they're just gonna kick him off, you know. Just really bad logistics on their part.
Okay, so I'm starting to kind of write some of this stuff down for our one pager, and then to be able to submit the recommendations. But so okay, so we think um, public announcement within the first 24 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. So right here, how could the CEO have responded more appropriately? He could have made a public appearance. He could have shown up somewhere. He could, instead of just a written statement to stakeholders, he could have appeared on camera in some facet. Social media was the primary mechanism that caused this event to explode into a crisis to begin with. So if we just rewind it back and used social media, that same lever that blew this up into a crisis as a method of kind of curbing the trajectory of the crisis. That would have really been important.
So one of the key things, though, that I know the United CEO came in and said, and a lot of other United employees, was that as they were making those initial statements, they did not have all the facts. There was an email that the CEO had sent out to the company stating that Dr. Dow was a belligerent passenger and basically had to be forcibly removed due to his own actions, not United actions. So obviously, there was a lot of miscommunication, and the CEO clearly did not have all of the facts, or I doubt he would have communicated that. If he did, you have no business being a CEO. But, so how do we think that the CEO could have responded more appropriately given that he didn't have all the facts? So, like you say, yes, he should have a public appearance, make a public statement, which 1,000% agree. But if he doesn't have all the facts, like maybe
You know,
acknowledge that he doesn't
I,
have the facts. Say, hey, we're looking into this, and I'm going to
Yeah,
give you guys a full statement as soon as I have all of the information, and I will
yeah,
keep you, you know, updated as I am updated, and
you,
having that kind of transparency.
yeah.
I see
That's
what
what I
you're
would do.
saying about the not having all the facts. However, the video and the amount of footage that came out of that event, I would have to say, use your own two eyes. Even if it isn't a blatant, like, I didn't know that they were bumped for United workers, or I didn't know the entire situation there, at least you see with your eyes this man was treated without respect. He was forcibly removed from the airplane. We do not see any footage of him being belligerent, even the footage at the very beginning. He's just respectfully declining, no, I'm not being removed from this flight, and then he does not engage with the flight attendants after that moment. That's hard to say he was acting belligerent. Even just looking at it with your own two eyes, this man deserves more respect than being hauled out of the airplane and forcibly removed in that way when we have no footage of him acting in a belligerent manner.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. However, playing devil's advocate here, what if what if it was a belligerent passenger and that portion of the situation simply wasn't recorded? What if one of his flight attendants was struck? I mean, you see things on the news all the time. People are walking down the street, somebody just walks by and smacks them in the face. No reason whatsoever, just all of a sudden out of nowhere. So again, just playing devil's advocate. What if there was something that had happened? And then if the CEO made that kind of a statement without having all of the facts, well, now he looks like he's not defending his employees. So I mean, it could really backfire on him in that sense too. It if he just didn't have all the facts. Obviously, we know the
Right.
situation now after the fact. And by the video, like you're saying, yes, I mean, he was treated so incredibly disrespectfully. But again, just playing devil's advocate, the what if before you give that kind of a statement, because then you got employees that are really upset with you because you did not support them and have their back.
What if like you're just sitting there, or he was just sitting there, and they're like, "Oh, you're getting kicked off this flight," and then he becomes belligerent, and like, "Oh, he's belligerent, like get him off the
Right.
flight."
Yeah, that I mean it could be the case, but again, we've been talking about how rapidly this event came out. And not only did it come out immediately, but it came out immediately from several different viewpoints. So as a CEO, it is your responsibility to have the pulse on the sentiment of your organization. And if you're taking a look and you're saying, hey, multiple views of this incident are showing me that there is no belligerence from the passenger side, it goes back to that they're operating from a scapegoating posture. They're putting the blame on the passenger in some way, some shape, or form. When we have that visual evidence, even at that time, as soon as the plane lands, they already have footage from multiple angles. It's hard to say, yeah, he didn't have all the facts. Again, yeah, you're right. He may not have had all the facts, but in this particular case, what if doesn't apply because we do have that footage of what happened prior to that event.
Right. No, 1,000%. I'm not saying disregard the footage. I'm saying but like when we go back to the question of like what do we think should have happened in the first 24 hours? And so that's where I'm just saying, like coming out with that public statement like we all agree on and saying, "Hey, I can see from the footage this is an intense and severe situation. We are handling this very seriously. We are going to be looking into it. And, as for now, I am going to be personally reaching out to Dr. Dow to get his take on the chain of events and, things of that nature to support Dr. Dow, but also not necessarily throw the company down the drain either in case it was something because he didn't have all the facts." So I 1,000% agree with you. I just, I think, in that first 24 hours, announce that we are taking this very serious and we are looking into this from every single angle possible. So, how
Cool.
do we want to answer that question for our paper?
I think
What do you
I
guys
think statement absolutely. I would say no matter what, he had to have done some kind of other statement than what they put out because it was very deflected. It deflected the situation and it deflected it back onto the passenger. So I think no matter what, the tone and the positioning and the framing of the statement should have been better. I think, or different even. Tone especially was a big key factor in what we're discussing here.
think? I agree. So what do you think acting with urgency would have looked like in this situation? So like making his own social media post, making a press release. Like we talked about him, preferably giving a public appearance of sorts. Like what do you think shows that and again gives that sense of urgency like the text was relaying as important?
One thing that a lot of companies do is they give out like takedown notices to people that have uploaded those videos where it's like, hey, take this video down or we're going to sue you kind of thing. And it's not necessarily like the right thing to do, but it's fairly effective in terms of optics and because if just less videos out on the internet make it, less people see it. So
Do you think that gives the impression though that they're then trying to hide what happened?
yeah, but I think less people read into that or like care, I guess, as much as like just, a 10-second viral video where it's like they can see with their eyes and compared to a legal takedown notice of a video where it's just like, oh, that's boring. I don't really care. Like, but
I feel like that's way too confrontative of a position to take for any kind of a company in this situation. Any kind of threat of legal action implies that again, it's on the onus is back on the customer that the company is defending itself no matter what, regardless of the outcome. And that's definitely not the position that they should want to take in this case. I think in this particular case, the best course of action is to let the videos play out as they are because like you said they're viral in nature, so they're going to evaporate from the public consciousness rather quickly. So yeah, it may be a crisis for a few days until the next viral event happens, but as soon as you start, okay, we're going to force legal action now, okay, what's going on here?
Right.
There's more to look, and
Right.
we have evidence of that in other ways where like Google and Apple have used that same kind of tactic, and it's put extra eyes on what they're doing because it's so confrontational.
Okay. So kind of moving on to like our recommendations section, and kind of what we're really going to submit here for this. Um, if you look, I was thinking number one thing should be, obviously after the situation, after they have all the facts and they are able to respond appropriately, um, adjusting their passenger removal policy as a company and as a whole, and implementing that training. So in our reading, when they talked about the Starbucks issue and how they actually closed down all of the stores for half a day to implement training for that specific situation, that to me screams, hey, we recognize we did something wrong and we are doing everything to make sure that we fix it.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, we are all human and people make mistakes and things can get misinterpreted on extreme levels sometimes. So making sure that that communication is clear in those situations. So if we're putting together our recommendations here, how do you guys feel about overemphasizing the change of their policy in removing passengers and having a minimum standard for what that looks like? Um, everybody obviously on the plane wants to take off. So what if they say, hey, we're going to offer $3,000 flight credit to somebody who's willing to step? I'm a really fast typer.
Cool,
So,
cool.
um, but so back to our recommendations. So policy changes. What do you guys think needs to happen at a bare minimum for policy changes?
I think you know, the pub what you say to the public and then also what you say to your employees should be the same thing. So, you gave a good example of when Starbucks had to shut down for half a day to um, make sure that all their employees knew their policy, and they announced that to the public as well, so people, wouldn't visit, right? And I think that's a really good messaging because it's cleared both to the public and to your employees. So, it's not confusing at all.
I completely agree with that. And the more public they can make some of this information, the better. So, kind of like in the reading, they presented 10 sweeping changes as its effort to improve customer experience. I think those 10 changes should be included in all purchases of an airline ticket in the fine print somewhere, so that it's at the very minimum, hey, when you book a flight with us, here's your flyers rights or something like that, to really show that they're committed to the changes that they've laid out.
Um, okay. So if we're gonna get specific here for policy changes, so volunteers first. Um,
Well, I think they outlined their direct policy changes. These 10 steps that, of course, limit the use of law enforcement, increase compensation up to $10,000, establish customer solutions team. Like these are all the changes that they've already made, but we need to ensure that they're living up to these changes. So some mechanism that verifies that they're following through with these, or some way to check that in an incident, that these steps are being followed by all of their frontline employees.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to the flight attendants and how they interact with passengers and um, like what they're told to do in certain situations. Because if the airline just kind of leaves it up to the um, airline employees to make decisions on their own and not have like a direct policy of what to do in each situation, it can get um, turned into a situation where, it can cost the company a lot of money and make the company look really bad. So,
So then there should be all the frontline employees should receive explicit training on these 10 sweeping changes that they've outlined in a similar vein as the Starbucks did for their DEI initiative.
Okay, I like it. Um, Crisis. So talking about like the statements, press releases, social media posts, things like that. We saw the social media post that United made. We all agree that it was trash. Um, so if we were to implement a recommendation there, obviously I don't know if we need to like restructure what needed to exactly have been said, but maybe just the process. So like having a team specifically, on with United to handle these types of situations. Um, obviously a lot falls on the CEO as the CEO of the company, but they are a company. There's more than just the CEO in a leadership position. So maybe having a process for maybe having a round table, get the CEO and all the other senior leadership members, on camera and say, we are all here, we are all involved. Like what kind of process should we try to implement? Like if we were to make a policy change here or anything regarding how that's handled.
Well, a company as large as United, they're going to have a PR team already instilled, but I'm curious to how much siloing happens between those stakeholders and senior leadership as a whole. So if they do not have a direct line or a direct constant form of communication between the PR and the public outreach team, if those folks in that department don't have the same connection with senior leadership has, when senior leadership releases a statement, it's not going to align with the PR team. So, as a direct policy, they need to break down whatever barriers exist in the communications between those two stakeholder groups.
Okay.
I definitely agree with that.
About the internal culture and psychological safety, because I'd be willing to bet some employees were not too thrilled about this either.
I think again, retraining the flight attendants and the gate agents to what United wants their policy to be and how they want their customer interactions to go. And then also, you know, I think morale is important, where if you have low employee morale, it's going to rub off on the customers and it's going to make situations worse than they are. So.
So what do we think? Like maybe trying to, acknowledging that they need to learn from the experience, not only have that one big giant blast of training where, hey, this was not okay, but some sort of continual training.
Mhm.
We're going to revisit this situation. Obviously new people are brought in, you have turnover and employees and things like that. So, just some ways to really kind of make sure that that internal culture stays strong as well. Because if your employees turn on you like the public did, then you're going down fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to the internal culture too and the safety of their employees, so we go back to the reason why Dr. Dow was kicked off of the flight is because they needed other United employees to make other flights from another airport. So that goes back to their internal culture because how are they scheduling those flight attendants? How are they coordinating the staffing at the various airports to allow a situation like that to happen? And why are they not offering better times and better ways for those employees to travel between airports? Those employees would be much better off if they were maybe on a red eye flight where less or fewer passengers are impacted. Maybe that would be easier on those employees anyways, because now they get to get some shut eye between flights instead of having to go from the airport flight and then right to work. What could that end up happening? What could end up happening for those employees who are exhausted on the job because they're making those constant flights? So again, I think that goes back, like you were saying, to the internal culture. We need different alignment there with how we're scheduling those employees.
And I
What
think
about,
that's
sorry, go ahead, James.
I think that's where the problem actually originated from, where, it's like, okay, we need these pilots at this airport at this time. And so how do we do that? We're going to kick these people off the flight that they paid for. And and it's just like, that's just bad policy. And, that should be definitely a redirected internal policy so that doesn't happen again.
So what about in the moment when that situation is starting to unfold at the very beginning there? What about empowering the employees to be able to take some sort of action to prevent that? So like whether they, can step in and say, hey, like before this escalates, they see things, tensions rising, all the things, like they're right there in the middle of all of it. What kind of power could they have been given to step in and say, hey, before this escalates further into this crisis that's now befold us, but um hey, I'm going to be able to offer you, in addition to what the airline offered you, an additional $1,000 if you're willing to step off. Like, could there be something that would be more empowering to the employees to help them de-escalate the situation?
Well, what
Does
if
that
it's
make sense?
not? What if it's not on the customer side? What if it's on the employee side? So the issue is because they're having to move pilots and they're having to move staff between airports. What if they can incentivize people who are already there at that airport, the target airport that needs the extra staff? What if they incentivize additional flight attendant compensation or extra flight credits or flights for their family or some other kind of benefit that could get employees to come in that are already there? Then you don't have to have employees on a flight. You already are sourcing local talent from those airports.
Okay,
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, I think
Um,
Yeah, that's where the problem originates from. And so it's like you fix that and you wouldn't have to deal with kicking people off flights, most likely.
Exactly.
what do you guys think about? I mean, obviously, the employees may have seen similar situations to this. Obviously, that didn't escalate quite as far as this one did. But what about incentivizing them in some way, shape, or form to speak up when they see these types of policies failing?
I think
I mean,
the vouchers are a good tool for gate agents to use. And then anonymous employee feedback would be probably a really good um tool to have, where it's like, these micro problems in a large organization, sometimes don't get picked up on. And so it's like when employees can take note of that, of those micro problems, then, you can get a better sense of how the whole organization runs. And if they can feel like they can do it anonymously, they can be honest on what the problem is. So.
anonymity is definitely powerful in a lot of those situations. I agree.
And I think you're right too, Megan. There needs to be some sort of empowerment for the staff themselves. So, of course, this kind of incident comes before a recent string of consumers behaving in deplorable ways on airplanes where they are having to be removed from aircraft for behavioral reasons, that there needs to be some way for the employees to notice and to maybe flag some of these passengers who may become belligerent before they even step on the airplane. If they can address that issue, then they wouldn't have this. They had to be forcibly removed from the airline. Now, they were already identified as an at-risk person before they even got onto the airplane to begin with.
Okay. I like it. So empowerment to the employees, offer vouchers, and I'm gonna type this up in a prettier version. I'm just taking bullet point notes right now. Trying to keep that morale up, internal culture, things like that we talked about. Constant communication between leadership and the PR team, break down barriers between these two stakeholder groups. What do we think about as far as like the text talks about renewal opportunities so they can really kind of come back stronger from something like this. Do we have any, obviously, in addition to the things that we've already talked about, do we have any ideas as far as how they might be able to really renew themselves as a company?
I think it's kind of hard where it's like everyone just kind of sees airlines as just a shitty experience overall or a bad experience overall, and um and a lot of people are just kind of bargain hunting, for the lowest price. And so it's just, like how do you build relations with customers if it's just, that's how a lot of people feel with traveling on an airplane, where it's just kind of like cattle herding. And I think, just the best thing that they could do really would be to have, a good advertising campaign of like, oh, we care about our customers, we're gonna have good customer service, and to really, promote the image of an airline that cares and that, you can count on to get you to your destination on time.
Yeah, I think any kind of additional public statement or PR after the sweeping changes that they've already made would be kind of overkill at this point. I mean, obviously, we're so far removed from this incident now. It's 8 years after the fact, but right away you can see like maybe a PR case like that or a PR kind of campaign like that would be effective. But if we're taking a look at, okay, in the context of 8 years later, how do people feel about United? I think it's far more important to focus on customer satisfaction ratings and other hard metrics that you can point to say, look, we've grown and evolved from this incident, and really point to the positive experiences and highlight those experiences using concrete quantitative and qualitative data.
So what do you guys think? I'm putting on my marketing hat right now. What do you guys think if, and just kind of thinking out loud here, if they turned it into a full-blown either internal or external campaign, like what we learned from Dr. Dow, what we learned from flight, what was it, 3411, I think.
Yes.
Like actually having that as a specific training, what we learned, and then taking that, teaching it like we talked about, but then also maybe saying how, putting the importance back on the customer. Because without customers, you don't have a company. If nobody's buying your product. So if you encouraged customers to, they're always, on every single flight, they're almost always talking to you about buying their credit card, buying their credit card, buying their credit card. I don't want your credit card. But what if I got points and I got miles, a small amount, for filling out a survey at the end of every one of my flights? How did you guys do? How was I treated? How did I feel? What was my wait time? Would I fly with you again? What suggestions do I have? Because I know in my experience, when I do a survey, I'm not on the ground. I don't have perspective from everybody, where they're coming from. So you have to tell me that. If you don't tell me, I don't know, and I can't fix it if I don't know. So if they like, I was thinking something along the lines of, hey, you get 100 miles. Can you do much with that? No, but after 1,000 flights, you might be able to. You get 100 miles for filling out our survey. Tell us how we did. Give us suggestions because we've learned from our mistakes and we want to do better. Something straightforward and really, really honing in on the fact that everyone at every day on every day at every point in our life we can always improve, we can always learn. So thoughts?
Yeah, that works perfectly because it captures that qualitative and quantitative data. And then
Mm-hmm.
we can even use what James is suggesting about the marketing campaign and highlight some of the wonderful things that customers have said about flying with United. And another point to that is if you are going to reward them, make it to where that reward doesn't expire. A lot of people don't fly that regularly. So if I'm getting 100 points, but they expire at the end of the year, what good does that do me? I'm not flying again for the rest of the year. But if you made that reward something that didn't expire, these miles don't expire. They carry over a year after year after year, or whatever the case is, then you would really be able to capture more of that incentive nature.
I think airlines, you have your boarding pass on your phone, right? With usually like the airline app. And so, like why don't they do like the survey after you land on the app? It's like, oh, how was your flight?
Yeah,
Yeah, it could
I
even
agree.
prompt them like as like a just brief notification that pops up.
Yeah. I think that would definitely give a lot of good insight to how an airline would, you know, run and how the customers
Yeah,
view it. So,
More
absolutely.
information. And okay, cool. Do you guys have any other suggestions then for either like renewing the company recommendations operationally, publicly, intuitively? Okay.
I
um,
don't think so.
no, I don't think so. I think we talked pretty extensively about
I
how they
know.
could improve their image.
Okay. Well, then I would say we kind of are wrapped up then.